We are born into a game we did not choose to play. From the moment we take our first breath, before we can even speak, we are handed a script. It is an invisible contract signed on our behalf by our parents, our schools, and our culture. The script tells us what success looks like. It tells us what love looks like. It tells us what happiness feels like. We are told that life is a linear progression. If we just study hard enough, work long enough, buy the right things, and impress the right people, we will finally arrive. We are told that the gnawing hunger inside us, that subtle feeling that something is missing, can be filled by the world outside us. But have we ever stopped, even for a terrifying second, to ask, whose dream are we actually dreaming? Are we living our own lives? Or are we merely reciting lines from a play written by dead people? The ancient Vedic sages of India call this Maya, the great illusion. They describe the world as a magic show projected by the mind and not as a place of solid, objective reality. In the Shvetasvara Upanishad, it is written, "Know that nature is a magic show and the great Lord is the magician. The whole world is filled with beings who are part of his magic. We are the audience, entranced by the show, laughing and crying at the shadows on the wall, forgetting that we are sitting in the theatre." In modern philosophy, the French thinker René Girard calls this phenomenon Mimetic Desire. He argued that human beings do not actually know what they want. We have no internal compass for desire. We are biologically wired to look outward. We copy the desires of those around us. We want the car not because we love the engineering, but because our neighbor wants the car. We want the promotion not because we love the work, but because our colleagues envy the promotion. We desire things simply because others desire them. We think we're climbing a ladder towards happiness, but often we're simply running on a hamster wheel generated by a collective hallucination. This is the true matrix. It is a closed loop of borrowed desire running in our nervous systems. It's what the Buddhists call Samsara, the cycle of aimless wandering driven by thirst. But is there a way out? It is not a physical escape. We do not need to fly to Mars or build a bunker. It is a journey of consciousness. It is a vertical ascent through 5 distinct levels of awareness, from the sleepwalker who fuels the machine to the player who hacks it. Let us walk this path together. This is the default setting of the human mind. It is where 99% of the world lives and dies. At this level, we are asleep, but we dream that we are awake. We wake up in the morning and feel a craving. We want the corner office. We want the beautiful partner. We want the luxury vacation we saw on Instagram. We tell ourselves with absolute conviction, this is what I want. This is who I am. But at level 1, we are unaware of the horrific truth. We are functioning as non-player characters, NPCs in someone else's script. We are not thinkers of our thoughts. We are the antennas receiving a broadcast. We are copying the desires of the herd, or what occultists and mystics call the egregore. An egregore is a collective thought form, a massive psychic entity created by a focused energy of a group. The American dream is an egregore. Corporate success is an egregore. Fashion is an egregore. These entities are beyond metaphors. They are energetic systems that feed on human attention. At this level, we are the batteries powering the economy of envy. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. We are trapped in what the Buddhists call the realm of the pretas, or hungry ghosts. In Buddhist cosmology, the hungry ghost is depicted as a being with a giant distended stomach representing infinite desire, but a neck as thin as a needle. No matter how much they consume, the food can never pass down their throat. They are eternally starving while surrounded by a feast. The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, verse 10 says, "Giving themselves up to insatiable desires, full of hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance, they hold false views through delusion and act with impure resolve." Why do we stay here? Because the matrix relies us on feeling inadequate. The entire global economy is built on a foundation of manufactured insecurity. If we ever woke up and felt enough, the stock market would collapse overnight. Marketing exists to create a wound and then sell us the bandage. So we keep running. We convince ourselves that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship will finally fill the void. We chase the horizon. But the horizon always moves, because you cannot fill a spiritual hole with a material object, the God-shaped hole as they call it. But eventually the running becomes too much. The legs give out, the heart breaks, and this breakdown is the beginning of the breakthrough. Then something happens. The machine malfunctions. Perhaps it is a divorce that shatters our picture-perfect life. Perhaps it is a burnout that lands us in the hospital. Perhaps it is a betrayal by the company we sacrificed our youth for. Or perhaps it is just a quiet, terrifying moment of clarity at 3 a.m. where we stare at the ceiling and ask the forbidden question, is this it? This is the awakening. But it is not peaceful, it is violent. We enter level 2, the cynic. Here we begin to see the simulacra, a term used by the philosopher Zen Buddhism. He argued that our society has replaced reality with symbols. We realize that the awards are fake plastic. The corporate ladder is a hamster wheel. The politicians are actors reading lines written by lobbyists. The news is not information. It is anxiety engineered for clicks. We see the strings on the puppet. We have taken the red pill. At this stage, a profound shift occurs. We stop wanting what they sell. We look at the luxury car and we don't see status. We see a hunk of metal and a monthly debt payment. We look at the celebrity and we don't see a god. We see a desperate human being addicted to validation. We look at the rules of society and realize they are just suggestions enforced by fear. But level 2 is a dangerous trap. It is perhaps the stickiest trap of all. It is the trap of the shadow. Because while we have stopped wanting the illusion, we have started hating it. And the Matrix knows a secret. Hate is just as binding as love. The cynic is filled with resentment. We look around at the sheep who are still asleep in level 1 and we feel contempt. We judge them. We feel intellectually superior because we see the corruption. But emotionally, we are miserable. We are lonely. We are angry. We define ourselves by what we are against rather than what we are for. We become the anti-conformist, which is just another form of conformity. If the world says go left, we compulsively go right just to be rebellious. The world is still controlling our direction. Nietzsche in Beyond Good and Evil says, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. The Matrix still has us here. It doesn't care if we love the system or hate the system, as long as we are obsessed with the system. Anger is a high-energy food for the egregore. Outrage is the currency of the internet. As long as we are reacting, we are not free. We're just an angry prisoner rattling the bars of the cage. Is there a way to stop fighting? Is there a way to put down the sword without picking up the chains? Exhausted by the constant anger of level 2, we realize that fighting the system only makes it stronger. Every punch we throw gets absorbed and sold back to us as content. So we decide to do the unthinkable. We withdraw completely. We enter level 3, the renunciate. This is the archetype of the monk in the cave. It is the Walden Pond phase. We refuse to play the game. We minimize our needs to starve the system. We might quit our high-stress jobs to become minimalists or delete our social media accounts. We might even move to a cabin in the woods or dive deep into spiritual asceticism. We withdraw our consent. We embrace the path of vairagya, the Sanskrit term for detachment or dispassion. There is a profound peace here. For the first time in our lives, the noise stops. We reclaim our nervous system. We learn to sit in silence without reaching for a phone. We watch the sunrise without needing to photograph it. We begin to taste what freedom actually feels like. We feel the truth of the biblical instruction. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in him. We feel safe. We feel holy. We feel like we have won. But is there a hidden flaw in level 3, a crack in the foundation of our sanctuary? Our peace is fragile because it depends on isolation. We are peaceful as long as nobody triggers us. We are calm as long as we don't have to deal with traffic or money or difficult relatives or the chaos of the marketplace. We have built a sanctuary, but it has walls, and walls are a form of prison. In the Zen tradition, there is a stern warning against soaking in the dead water. This refers to the meditator who gets stuck in the bliss of emptiness and refuses to return to the world of form. They become a stone Buddha, calm but useless. We have escaped the game, but deep down we are still afraid of it. We are hiding in the cave because we believe the world is bad and the cave is good. This is still a form of duality. We are still defining ourselves in opposition to the matrix. We are free from the noise, but we are not yet free from the fear of the noise. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, will not let us hide forever. Eventually, the cave will collapse. The money will run out. The tooth will start to ache. The world will come knocking. To move beyond the cave, we must undergo a death. Not a physical death, but something far more terrifying to the mind. The death of the desirer. This is level 4, the 0 point. In the Christian mystic tradition, this is St. John of the Cross's dark night of the soul. Here we face the ultimate truth. We realize that the I who wanted to succeed in level 1 and the I who hated the system in level 2 and even the I who wanted to be spiritual in level 3 were all just constructs. They were all masks worn by the ego. They were all stories we told ourselves to feel solid. We touched the void. The Buddhists call this sunyata, emptiness. This is the moment that the floor drops out. It is the moment of existential freefall. We realize that we are not our name, our job, our history, or our trauma. We are not even our spiritual progress. In this state, we stop projecting meaning onto the world. We see things exactly as they are, without the filter of I like this or I hate this. We stop dividing reality into sacred and profane. We realize that the traffic jam is just as holy as the temple. We enter the state described by the Sufi mystic Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. We become transparent to the system. Imagine the matrix uses hooks to control us. These hooks are made of fear, guilt, pride, and desire. But these hooks need something to latch onto. They need the Velcro of the ego. They need a me to be offended, a me to be jealous, a me to be proud. At level 4, there is no Velcro left on the soul. The hook passes right through us like smoke through a screen. We are in the world, but we are no longer reacting to it. We have reached the state the Stoics called apatheia. Not apathy, but a divine equanimity that cannot be shaken by external events. We are the eye of the storm. We realize the profound truth of the Ashtavakra Gita. You are the solitary witness of all that is, forever free. Your only bondage is that you practice the meditation of seeing yourself as something else. We are free. There is no longer anyone inside us to be trapped. The me who was a prisoner has dissolved into the witnessing presence. But we cannot stay in the void forever. We still have a body. We still have a life. What happens when the nothingness meets the somethingness? And finally, we come full circle. We leave the cave. We leave the void. We walk back into the marketplace. This is level 5, the player. In the Hindu tradition, this is called Leela, divine play. We realize that life is not a test, nor a prison, nor a school. It is a dance. It is the cosmic play of the divine pretending to be many. We re-enter the game, but this time the dynamic has completely flipped. We know it's a game. We might buy the nice car simply because we appreciate the engineering and the beauty of the design. We might take the high-powered job not because we need the power to feel safe, but because we enjoy the challenge of solving complex problems. We play the role of employee, parent, or lover with total passion, knowing all the while that this is just a costume. We wear the mask loosely. We embrace the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 47, regarding karma yoga. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the result of your activities, nor be attached to inaction. This is the key to level 5, action without attachment. We act, but we do not cling. We love, but we do not possess. We build, but we are ready to watch it all fall down without losing our peace. We dance with the illusions without believing them. The player acts as the architect of reality. We harness the tools of the matrix, money, technology, influence, and channel them entirely into building sanctuaries of beauty and freedom for others. We become what the Taoists call the empty boat, moving through the river of life without colliding with anything, because we are empty of self-importance. We become dangerous to the system through our absolute fearlessness. We starve the beasts simply by refusing to tremble. We are the lucid dreamers in the nightmare, the glitch that heals the code. The famous 12th century Zen sequence, the 10 Bulls, depicts the stages of enlightenment. It culminates in the monk descending from the emptiness of the mountain to return to the city, carrying a sack of gifts, laughing with the butchers and the wine drinkers. The final verse reads, "Barefooted and naked of breast, I mingle with the people of the world. My clothes are ragged and dust-laden, and I am ever blissful. I use no magic to extend my life. Now before me the dead trees become alive." Most of us spend our lives bouncing between level 1 and level 2, chasing the illusion or fighting it. Some of us find temporary peace of level 3. But the invitation of true spirituality is to go deeper, to strip away the layers of borrowed desire, to face the void of level 4, and ultimately to return as the player in level 5. To live in the matrix, but not be of the matrix. The door to the cage was never locked. It was held shut by our own grip. The moment we let go, the game changes. We stop working for the matrix, and the matrix starts working for us. The game is still running, but now it's your move.